Hello everyone, and welcome back to Deeper Grooves, Musicians on Music, hosted by Cliff Beach and sponsored by California Soul Music record label. Today I have the honor of having a very special guest that's also a personal friend of mine. Mr. John Heintz is here in the studio to talk about his supergroup, the Big Ol' Nasty Get Down. Are you ready for some funk? I know I am. Please help me welcome John Heintz.
How's it going, man?
I'm good, John. How are you?
Good, man. Thanks so much for sending over that song. It's fucking rad. I'm still listening through, and we'll have some notes and a little bit later.
Oh yeah, man. Take your time. No press. I just like to hop on stuff when it's fresh in my mind.
Yeah, totally.
Awesome, man. Very excited to have you on the podcast today. Just finished up talking with Philip Lassiter and his stuff with Filthy and Prince and a bunch of stuff. That was amazing. But very excited to have you talking about the Big Ol' Nasty Get Down. I can't believe that you got 2 volumes under your belt, and I've heard you're kind of working on three new volumes right now. So we'll get into all of that. But again, I'm a huge fan. As you know, I have both your vinyl in my collection, so I've listened to them quite a lot, since I've had them, and just, they look amazing and they sound amazing. It's just a great supergroup, really.
Oh, thank you so much.
So yeah, man, I've known you a while, but just kind of let me know a little bit about the origins of Big Ol' Nasty Get Down. I saw you started in 2007 at a jam session with members of Galactic and Papa Grows Funk and Dirty Dozen Brass Band and a bunch of other people. But how did this spark kind of from an idea to full fruition?
Well, I mean, that experience, that jam, I really walked away with a lot of interest in seeing what could be done to sort of create, I don't want to say stage an environment, but create an environment that had the same kind of energy that you would get from a live show, as well as the freshness of musicians that aren't in the same band playing together and just kind of going for it. And I saw the fun that everybody was having and, felt the energy of the crowd and thought, I've always heard that the hardest part is to get that live kind of sound or that energy in the studio. And what if you were to create an environment that kind of lent to that exchange and, allow, non-musical participants be part of the creative factor, providing their excitement, their energy, and their love for music, while being in the same room with a lot of the, top guys in the scene at that point, from the New Orleans scene. And there was a lot of folks from the Asheville scene, and then we had the Parliament Funkadelic crew. And it lent for, being able to create a situation once it finally happened that did yield the kind of results we had hoped for. So the process of it after that jam really became networking with a lot of different players in the jam band community. I was fortunate enough that the Lee Boys, which is a Sacred Steel band similar to the Robert Randolph and the Family Band, put me under their wing. And because of they're such fucking amazing musicians that it lent to a lot of players in the festival world wanting to sit in with them. And I didn't play a lot on stage with them. They'd let me sit in, a decent amount of the shows, but also they were teaching me the business side of things, because I came in totally green. And just through the attraction of their musicianship and it leading to just tremendous musicians coming to the stage to join in with them on a song, I kind of saw it as an opportunity to kind of start building my network. Because oftentimes I was going to be the guy on the ground that the musician might touch base with first before they're going to be hitting the stage with the band, almost like tour manager type of situation. So I was able to build some relationships with outstanding players. And but there's also the reality that the Lee Boys they were their own band, and I was blessed to be able to experience, several months out on the road with them in all aspects to really learn, the beginning parts of the trade. There was always in the back of my mind, though, that this is their band, and, this probably isn't going to be a long-term thing for me. This is a chance for me to kind of get some new tools for the toolbox, sharpen some skills, and figure out what I'm going to do as my own type of touring entity or studio band. I just knew I didn't want to go from that to winding up in like a garage band. Not that there's anything wrong with a garage band. I just wanted to be able to make a profession of it that had a little more stability than fighting for local gigs on a regular basis. I had gotten a taste of what the national touring scene looked like and the level of player that was participating in it, and I just wanted to remain within that community, even though in a large part my playing skills at that stage wasn't anywhere close to being in that world. I had found myself in a pretty elite crew of players without the elite skills on the bass. So I had some catching up to do. But it was also, part of the joy of the journey, really forcing myself to learn the thing that I truly love to do and be able to be proficient at it enough to be able to hang with some players that I'd like to play with.
Iron sharpens iron. And so I can see how, you're going to be, even if it's difficult through that process, you're going to be so much better at the end of going through that experience.
Absolutely. I mean, it's hard not to, and it's no special skill. It's just you're a product of your environment a lot of times, and part of the learning process is just exposure to new things and learning how to adapt those into your world if it's something that you want to hang on to. So as the reality with the Lee Boys was setting in with needing to kind of create another type of environment or another type of band for me to exist in, I started asking a lot of these players that I had come in contact with through them, and others that I had met independently, if they'd be interested in trying something like this. It's taking the old theory that a lot of musicians when we're young talk about, which is, if you could build the ultimate band using your favorite drummer from this band, favorite guitar player from that band, so on and so forth, what would it be? And I added a lot of that philosophy to or that idea to the overall structure and foundation of the project, because I thought, it'd be fun to have a rotating cast and have the ability to have a freshness each time that's not the same 5 or 6 people going into the room and, doing their thing. It's a chance for a lot of players to, share different musical experiences with a lot of people that they either grew up listening to, that are their contemporaries in the scene, or are the up-and-coming players that absolutely deserve to be seen on the bigger stage. And so the response from a lot of these people was, that's a great idea, but it will never happen. Like, how are you going to pull this one off with everybody having a tour schedule? And they weren't wrong. I mean, that was a logistical fucking nightmare. Like, it's hard enough to get a bunch of creative people in a room that are all in the same town, basically on a similar gig schedule. But when you're dealing with, bringing in, I think we brought in roughly 40 players, 35, 40 players for this session when it finally happened, from all different touring bands. And it was just, we were lucky enough that there was one magical week in December that everybody was home. And so that's how it started. I wound up partnering up with a couple of the guys from Your Mama's Big Fat Booty Band, J.P. Miller and Derek Johnson. And they also had a lot of contacts throughout the scene. So we just pooled our connections and, went for it. And we all went down to New Orleans December 10th of 2007, and the nuttiness began.
Wow, so that's like kind of the origins of Volume 1, how you assembled all those players. So then when you went to do Volume 2, like, how had you grown since then from Volume 1, and what were kind of like the differences of your second volume versus the first?
Well, I'd say the biggest difference was we had now done it, and we had I wouldn't say a sound blueprint, but we had a blueprint and some form of model that we could follow this time. Because, like, we would just make the shit up as we went a lot with Volume 1, because, the idea of collaborations and supergroups is not a new thing. But when you're talking about on the scale that we were going into, also with no music written, it was completely an environment of trusting in the creativity of the people that were involved and allowing it to happen organically without coming in with a set idea and trying to get everybody on board with that idea. It became a true collective of people creating together and everybody's input being heard. And there wasn't a hierarchy system in place by any means. Not that we would ever put something in there, but sometimes when you have bigger names than others that are involved, it's easy for those names to, kind of spearhead the whole thing. And what happened is we really had a pretty neutral community of everybody sharing the love and the creative aspects of the music together, and not, being 100% attached on them hearing something a certain way and allowing for that next person to come in and play their part. And because it could have gone the opposite way. We didn't know, if we were going to be coming across with at the end of it all as with nothing. It could have been an album that had a lot of just musicians soloing all over the place. But what happened is we wound up with some music that, for lack of better terms, were real songs. They were songs that deserved more care and attention than we, I think, had initially anticipated, which, of course, it went from a $20,000 budget to now we're looking at, I think that album ran me, I don't know, just over 100, 120, something like that. And, it became a bunch of, and a lot of that's because we were choosing specific people that we wanted to play for the overdubs as well. And, that at that time was, a lot of flights, a lot of meals, a lot of lodging, which, inflated a lot of that because we did most of the mixing and the post-production at George Clinton's studio in Tallahassee. So my production partner at the time, Frank Mapstone, and I would go down there for months on end. And, it was, it was financially a lot of weight to carry, especially having not anticipated that kind of need. So moving on to Volume 2, we knew some of the pitfalls that could happen on a budget level. We knew that whatever number we put up there was going to be like, that's going to be kind of a loose number, because at a certain point, for me, I want the player that I want. And I will sit back and put a song on hold for 3 years until that player might become available. I start hearing very specific people for the different parts when the songs are in production. So with Volume 2, there was definitely more of time spent waiting just for the availability of a player to be able to hit their part. And in a lot of ways, I feel like that was time that was well spent waiting, because the end result, for example, we had Vernon Reid play on Volume 2 on Creatures of Habit. And I believe at the time, Living Colour had a pretty heavy tour schedule, and I just knew that he was the right sound and the right solo for that song, and I just couldn't put somebody else on there to fill the space when that, to me, felt like what was going to be best for the song. So, that part was a little different, but the fact that it takes for fucking ever to get a big old nasty Get Down album out, that didn't change. Like it's a lot of moving parts and a lot of things that are very untraditional when it comes to production, when it comes to how we record the music, to how we write the music, and then what we do with the tracks after, the foundation is.
Did you ever in the process kind of think like, man, I've bitten off a little bit more than I could chew, like this is the juggernaut or a beast of a project, being able to get it from start to finish?
Every fucking day I wake up, I'm like, holy shit, how did this grow into what it has? Because it's really taken on a life of its own in a lot of ways, and has become, in a spotlight manner, it's definitely gained more recognition than I think I had initially anticipated. But also from a sheer quantity of players involved, it has grown to a point that's, there's like over 200 of us, I think, at this point.
When you talk about the people that have been on here, for people that don't know and listeners that haven't heard Big Old Nasty Get Down yet, but most likely will, you had the Lead Boys, and Your Mama's Big Fat Booty Band, Dirty Dozen Brass Band, people from Galactic and Dumpster Funk and Funky Meters and P-Funk and Living Colour, Arrested Development, Earth, Wind & Fire, James Brown, Rolling Stones, Kool and the Gang. You had Taylor Dane on the album, Catdelic, Parliament Funkadelic, more people from Dumpster Funk, people from Fishbone, just like the names go on. And recently I saw you doing some stuff with Chad Smith from Red Hot Chili Peppers. So, now having up to 200 players, that's just, I've never seen anything of its kind to that level and magnitude.
Thanks. And I don't think I have either. I try not to think about it in comparison to what else is out there, but like at a certain point when I look at the list of people involved, I would imagine it's got to be pretty unique, just in the sheer ability to have access to that many different players. Because I had a really strong business sense coming into the industry and understanding that the network is as critical as the musicianship a lot of times. And yeah, it became kind of like my mission to meet as many of the players that I've grown up respecting and the up and coming folks that don't have that exposure yet, and figure out how we can all create together. And then it's just like, when you look at every song kind of having a different lineup, and then you look back and there's 120 songs sitting in the catalog that haven't been released. That adds up really quick to a massive personnel involved in the project. And that part has been it's been fun to watch, and it's also been fun to just be able to have access to musicians that I never could have dreamed of having the ability to make music with or create something with. Because my background wasn't music. I came in at 30. And yeah, it's just been a pretty interesting journey.
Yeah, man, that's like a Bill Withers kind of approach, being a little older into the game, or Rodney Dangerfield. But there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you're in it now.
I am, and I would love to have the privilege of being able to continue doing it as long as I can. But you know, it's a changing world constantly with the industry. So you know, as I get older, my my stubbornness and my headstrong, I don't want to learn more. You know, it's a new way of things. You know, I just want to I want to do what I'm doing, and you know that's been kind of a interesting thing to have to implement. You know, just staying hip on all the current stuff, just to know what to do with this stuff when it's ready to go.
Yeah, so speaking of that, I mean, having so many songs in the can, you're working on how many volumes now, going into the next phase of Big Ol' Nasty Get Down?
Yeah, the next phase, I'm playing with some different ideas, with looking at things on a more song by song basis and less as a, I guess, body of work. So, you know, theoretically, of the 120 songs that I've got, I would say maybe 110 of them are strong enough that I would feel proud to put them out. And then there's a few that, you know, aren't my favorites. They might be others that people would love, but of the bunch, to me it's all been very very much material to be proud of. So I think what the game plan is going to be, because I mean that would make up at least 10 albums worth of stuff.
That's what it sounds like. Yeah, volume 3 through 10.
Exactly, volume 3 through 13.
Oh wow, even more than I thought.
And then we'd be also looking at. I probably got 60 hours of jams that I've got when Norwood from Fishbone and Chad Smith played for the first time together. It's a 20-minute jam that's just ridiculous. There's because when we get to the sessions, there's always that hour of everybody just kind of warming up and jamming around and stuff, and there's a lot of fun stuff that happens during those. And because they're not necessarily in song form, I haven't really figured out the best way to get those pieces out there, but they're there. So it's the 110, 120 songs are actual, songs in form. And then, the rest is the jams. And then there's more stuff that's happening every day too.
It keeps you busy for sure. So hindsight, now that you kind of worked on the first two projects and then you have these other ones in the can, is there anything that you would do differently, just knowing what you know now versus then?
I mean, I'm sure there's mistakes that I made along the way that, looking back, I may have tried to avoid, but I've also found a lot of times mistakes are critical with certain aspects, and I've learned a lot from those that, I may not have had the eyes open enough to be able to see those unless the mistake had happened. So I kind of just go with it. Like, there's, what? Here's one. George Porter Jr. showed up at our very first sessions in New Orleans. And he came to just kind of poke his head in. And for some reason, not a single one of us was like, George, come play. I never understood, how we didn't make that happen. He was right there watching, just checking it out, because, his guys in Galactic, Dumps the Funk, Dirty Dozen Brass Band, Big Sam's Funky Nation, basically all the hitters in town all on the spot. And, it was like, why didn't we ask George? I mean, we've got to try. I've worked with George since, but it was just that one time. It was like, that's so bizarre how he didn't wind up in the mix.
So that's interesting how that happens. So is there anybody else that you haven't worked with yet, but you still would want to play with?
Yeah, Nile Rodgers has always been really high on my list, and we've talked a number of times over the years about doing something because we've got a lot of mutual friends that are in the project, and it seems to make sense with his style, and for me it's a band, it's a project, but for me it's also like I like the historical aspect of it where, it's getting a chance to chronicle some new music with these living legends that fucking wrote the book, you know what I mean? They are the ones that created so much of what has been morphed into music today. So, there's players, certainly Dennis Chambers is another one, Erykah Badu. These are different players that I think would fit the vibe of the project really well. And then there's, I'm always happy to throw somebody into the mix that is like not even close to the style. Like on Volume 2, we had Ryan Martini from Mudvayne on bass. And if anyone, has heard Mudvayne, that shit's fucking hard. Like they had a singer that punched himself like repeatedly on stage, right? All painted and just fucking wild. But the one thing that was always apparent with them was the musicianship was out of this fucking world. And I had gotten to know Ryan over a couple of years through Warwick Basses and asked him to be part of the Volume 2 sessions. And Ryan comes from a jazz background, but, he fit so well into the mix and just really brought a lot to the tunes and the grooves and all that. But when, people would read that, wait, Mudvayne? And they'd be like, yeah, Mudvayne. And then it even gets funnier. It's like, I've got a track that's Taylor Dayne on vocals, the bassist from Mudvayne on bass, the guitar player from the time on guitar, Ivan Neville on B3, and Taylor's drummer, her live drummer, who's never recorded a single song with her in 25 years, recording his first song with her on it. Like, it's just such a wild combination,
Yeah, man. That's crazy. I mean, and working with so many people, I mean, you got to have some type of really crazy or interesting story that's appropriate for the podcast, obviously, but something just about your experience. Like, if there's something where you're like, oh my God, this just happened.
Well, I mean, there's been a few of them. There, in the very beginning, I can remember we had, so the guys in the Booty Band had done a show at the Capital City Carnival, I believe it was, in maybe October of 2007. And P-Funk was on that. Bill and Fishbone was on that. And I can't remember who the other band was, but they wound up linking up with Gary Scheider in the lobby of the hotel. And they had previous interactions and worked with Sidney Barnes from Motown, who had written some songs with George in the Funkadelic era. I'll Bet You was one of the ones they wrote together. And they get talking to Gary about Sidney. Next thing you know, they're all on the phone together. And so Sidney was one of the first people that we had talked to about getting into the project. And, then they hit, I think JP hit Gary up, and I had hit Belita and Kendra up. And all of a sudden, we've got a pretty significant base of the Funkadelics that are going to be getting involved in the project. At no point have we ever really thought to ask for George. I feel like we had probably ruled it out as just like too big of an ask, or we wouldn't be able to afford him, whatever. But I think it was Christmas Eve or really close. No, it couldn't have been Christmas Eve because we had already done We had already done the project, I think, the first session. It was sometime in early December. We get this call from Gary. And Gary's like, hey, do you want George? And we're like, what? Yeah, we want George. He goes, okay, hang on. I'll call you right back. So we wait a couple minutes, roll by, and all of a sudden there's this random phone number showing up on JP's phone, and it's George. And George is like, hey, man, I heard you guys are doing something, something a little crazy. I can't make it to New Orleans, but I'd love to be part of it. And if you guys would like to come down to the studio in Tallahassee that I have to keep working on it and finish it, well, I'm happy to open the doors to you. So that moment was just, an absolute mind-blowing game changer. You hear this old guy on the phone, and at that time, he talked. It was hard to understand a lot of what he was saying, and but we were just picking up the little pieces and hoping that we were in fact interpreting it right, and that he had just invited us to basically his home to finish this thing up. So down there, it was something else. Like, they run that studio 24 hours a day, people coming and going, and getting to see the way George approaches songs and approaches the way he writes lyrics and this and that was one of the most fascinating things I had ever seen. And it started to make a lot of sense about how they approach a lot of the Parliament Funkadelic stuff based upon what I was seeing. But it was so nutty down there because George's art gallery is also there. So, I'm down there with my eyes kind of just like wide open and my mind blown that this crazy little idea that I had all of a sudden, George Clinton is sitting in front of me with his rainbow wig on, shouting all kinds of crazy lyrics and painting away. And, then you look in the other room and you've got, all these other iconic players that are working on some other stuff. So, that was one of the first, I would say, G-rated mind-blowing moments of the project, and it all goes downhill from there.
But it seems like George Clinton and P-Funk has been a big influence on you, especially when it comes to some of the artwork for the albums. How did that artwork kind of come about? It's very specialized and tailored to you guys, but definitely plays homage to a lot of the George and Parliament stuff. Was that intentional? I'm assuming that it was. And who's the artist behind it?
Not so much, just because, to be honest with you, my background in music was not funk. I mean, I would hear it and I would like it, but I didn't know what to ask for to hear it again. But I always knew I enjoyed it when I heard it, somewhere in public or, on somebody's car radio or whatever. But, it wasn't something that I knew that as funk to be able to look for more of it. My musical upbringing was more in the Faith No More, Primus, and even growing up in Indiana, a lot of what I would consider almost Americana rock, like the John Mellencamp's and the Tom Pettys and the Bob Dylans and all that. And then also country and bluegrass. So I didn't have a lot of knowledge of just how significant what George and the crew had done over time. That was the beginning of one of the most enjoyable, mind-blowing educations I have ever experienced. Learning, going in deep and actually being in the presence of these players while I'm learning that, the Humpty dance is actually sampled Let's Play House, or that, this, that, or the other thing it's them. And by the time, you get done filling your mind with all that information, you realize those motherfuckers didn't leave a green hit for anybody. They straight up were the masters of just the cool shit back then, and still today in a lot of ways. So back to the art aspect, what led me to, I guess, being down at George's studio and seeing him working on all of his art and hearing the music and whatnot did have an impact on me. But my mother's an artist, so I've always kind of enjoyed art and in general. And I had seen Erykah Badu's covers, and I loved them. Like, they were just unbelievable, the way that artist had turned her into like a mechanical version of her, and the detail and so on and so forth. And so I was like, I would love to get that guy to do it. But I didn't know who that guy was. And it just so happened that there was a gallery here in LA that was a rep of his work. And I stumbled in there and was just blown away by just the collection of insane stuff that that had happened. I was able to track down the artist Emick, and I asked him if he would be willing to take on a commission and do the art for the first album. And he was a big George Clinton fan, so it lent itself really well, because a lot of these top artists, they're just hard to get to the schedule, or they're not taking on new clients. So once Emick did all that artwork, we wound up reproducing some of the art, and I learned about the collector's base that exists for poster art. And that was another mind-blowing situation, because now all of a sudden my eyes are opening up to a secondary way of creating income in an environment where people aren't buying the music. You know, it was at that point where streaming was kind of taking over. Physical sales were starting to really fizzle out. But if I get the right artist to do the cover for the album, or I get the right artist to do the cover for the song, they have a fan base that's waiting for them to drop the next anything. And if we were to run prints of the covers, if they're of a high enough level art form, or, you know, hitting an artist fan base and our fan base that, you know, that would appreciate it, we would be able to start offsetting some of the production costs involved with the music, because we couldn't tour as a band. And at that point, we didn't have an online store really going. So we would take the art, and with the artists, we would run a series of posters. I shouldn't say posters. They're high-end art prints. They're all signed and numbered on fancy paper, high-end inks, and all that good stuff, and in limited quantity. And we would release those. And so the art became as important in a lot of ways as the music, and the desire to collaborate in the same form as we were doing with the musicians became kind of a thing for me to really explore, starting to work with all the major poster artists out there, because they were kind of, they made themselves visible that music was very much of interest in their world and played a large part in what they were doing artistically. So I thought that bringing the art as a heavy focal point in the project would be, you know, a really positive thing. And I also kind of look at it like, you know, you have one opportunity to impress somebody when you show them something. And if the music, if the artwork is captivating enough to draw somebody in to give the music a chance, then we've won. And that's part of how we've really approached it. And I'm kind of getting ready to take it into the next step with animation and music videos, but I'm scared to death of what that's going to cost. So
yeah, man, you're always just finding some new expensive way to make your art and project even on a bigger scale. But that's cool. I mean, I think, you know, if you want to do something, there's always a way. Cost aside, there's always a way. If the law of attraction will bring it to you, just putting a pen to paper saying, I want to do this, then it will come. So then what would be, as my last question, your your legacy? What do you want to be most known for your music and for this project, Big Old Nasty Get Down?
I mean, I guess just being a connector of a lot of really good people and creating environments that allow musicians just to be musicians and have fun with it without, somebody telling them to do it a certain way. Like being able to create music that, whether it's being listened to today, yesterday, or tomorrow, it's still going to be relevant and it's not aimed at any particular time. It's, to me, I feel like all of the music has been done with a really, really high amount of integrity. And there's what these different players have contributed to the project really needs to be preserved, and there needs to be an opportunity for the light to be shined on so many incredible musicians. Because this project, I may run it, but it's never really been about me. It's always been about the sum of all of the parts and finding a way to create equal exposure to, the up and coming badass that's playing in their local bar, as well as with the, living legend. Everybody kind of have that neutral ground where everybody's voice is heard and everybody's talent's respected and everybody's creativity is accounted for. So to me, it's about having, even beyond my time with it, having a foundation and a space for people just to experiment and have fun and not feel the weight of the industry, the weight of the record label, the weight of the fan base, trying to dictate it to be something different than just something that organically happens.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that you're, making kind of a teamwork situation where the spotlight isn't necessarily on the leader, but really on the project and the individual players. And of course, like I said, you have a laundry list of a who's who of people on here. So I'm very excited to hear Volume 3 and beyond. And definitely, we'll circle back to you once this is done and out so that you can hear it. And, just thank you again for taking the time to chat with us today. And, very excited to hear more from you in the future.
Oh, of course. My pleasure. And thank you so much for inviting me on.
Awesome, man. Well, we'll definitely talk to you soon. Take care. Until then.
All right. Take care, Cliff.
Peace.
Thanks for listening today to Deeper Grooves, Musicians on Music, hosted by Cliff Beach and sponsored by California Soul Music Record Label. I would like to thank our special guest today, my personal friend, John Heintz from the Big Old Nasty Get Down, for coming on air to talk with us about their newest projects coming out. I would also like to thank our engineer, Tim Hall, and 1192 Studios for mixing and mastering this recording today. If you like what you hear and you want to hear more, you can visit us online at www.californiasoulmusic.com/deeper grooves. Until then, take care. We'll see you next time.